Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to tackle the subject of what I see as a challenge, the challenge of covering a John Lennon song. And I'm going to go through quite a few that I've listened to over the years, and just recently in preparation for this video I listened to a whole bunch, and I'll give you my views and then come up with my top 10 at the end. Just before I do that, I just want to mention last night I was watching the music of Lennon and McCartney on YouTube, and it's that kind of 45-minute documentary where they have artists performing their songs, and some of it is kind of classical instruments and some of it is on some kind of weird keyboard, and you've got Cilla Black singing as well. And I don't know if I recall ever seeing it actually, and I was very impressed with it. But it's a very humorous scenes from John and Paul introducing various numbers and having a laugh. So thoroughly enjoyed that, and it's in that show I saw Peter Sellers, I wouldn't say sing A Hard Day's Night, but recite A Hard Day's Night to comic effect, and I'm not sure if that counts as a cover version, but that's pretty enjoyable. I knew that, I'd heard that before. So I'm going to go through, in no particular order, just the ones which didn't make the top 10 and tell you what I think. There's a couple from Elton John. He had a B-side, the B-side of Lucy in the Sky, which was a Lennon song from the Beatles years, which will feature later on. The B-side was a Lennon track from Mind Games, and if you've watched some of my videos, you'll know it's one of my least favourite Lennon songs, and he does a pretty awful version, if I'm honest, and apparently Lennon was playing guitar on it, not that you can notice, so that's pretty dismissible. A better effort from Elton was September 1980 in Central Park. I just watched this the other day, and he's basically, obviously it's while John's still alive, and he starts off by saying, this is a song written by a friend of mine, you all know it, beautiful song, and actually he just lives across the road, and he hasn't had an album out in ages, but he's making one now, and it's John Lennon. Then he goes to sing a kind of extended version of Imagine, and it's very poignant because obviously Central Park is very close to where Lennon lived and was shortly to die, unfortunately, so that was quite good to watch. Then we've got various other versions of Imagine which I wasn't really impressed with. Julian Lennon tried it recently, a noble cause, you know, Ukraine and all that, but he was playing the guitar, and to me it's always been a piano song. Randy Crawford tackles Imagine, and it's pretty, I wouldn't say forgettable, but it doesn't do much for me. Joan Baez does a slightly better version. I remember back in the 80s when I was in Florida in the US, there was some girl with a guitar and she was playing Imagine, and she got a few of the notes wrong on the tune, and or what I thought were wrong, and then she said, I'm playing the song, the Joan Baez version, and so I listened to the Joan Baez version, and sure enough she changes a couple of notes here and there, and I don't find them that offensive anymore, but I used to. Emmylou Harris does a nice live version of Imagine, that was nice. Paul Weller does a version of Instant Karma, which is okay. Sean Lennon tried to do Isolation. Again, he tried, like Julian with Imagine, who did it on the guitar. Sean does Isolation on the guitar, and it's a piano song as far as I'm concerned. Yoko, 1986 on her tour, she quite bravely performed Imagine, but she can't sing it as well as John, so it does beg for us to compare, and so most people do, and it comes up well short, obviously, and even the bit where John goes ooh, Yoko's kind of sort of shouting or something, and it just doesn't work. Anyway, it was a noble effort. Duran do a better version of Instant Karma I was listening to the other day for the first time. When I was growing up in the 70s, I'm just trying to remember the big Beatles covers or Lennon McCartney covers. Got to Get You Into My Life, which is a McCartney song, so not in scope for this video, but I do remember Aerosmith doing John's song Come Together, quite a big chart hit, and Susie and the Banshees did quite a decent version of Dear Prudence, so I remember that from back in the day. More recently, Green Day version of Working Class Hero doesn't do much for me, other than it just does bring in a bit more instrumentation to make it interesting towards the end, you know, drums and then guitar. Beck does a version of Love, mucks around with the tune too much for my liking, but not bad. World Party do a version of Happiness as a Warm Gun in about 1990, around then, 92 maybe, that around the time of the Bang album, maybe it was 93. But they do a fairly faithful copy, to not an improvement on the original, as most of these aren't, if we're honest. Noel Gallagher more recently did a version of Mind Games, nothing special. Liam Gallagher a couple of years ago did a version of I Don't Want to Be a Soldier, which is reasonably interesting. Dave Edmunds back in 1990 did a live version of the Ballad of John and Yoko at a John Lennon tribute concert organised by Yoko. I think it was in Liverpool. Good version, but basically a copy of the original. David Bowie tries to do Young Americans, and he gets John Lennon to help him on guitar, but basically, in my opinion, he gets rid of any melody there was in the song, which is a beautiful melody, and he kind of turns it into a bit of a shouter, and it loses its charm and beauty in the process, and he doesn't even bother to sing the line Jai Guru Deva Om, just leaves that out completely and has guitar fill in that bit. So that's not one of my favourites. Jackson Browne, some people disagree, no doubt. Jackson Browne does a quite nice version of Oh My Love. Mary Chapin Carpenter tackles Grow Old With Me, and to me this doesn't work. It ends up being too syrupy, and maybe it's the thing with John's songs, they're too personal, or they're either about Yoko or they're just too, some of his political songs. Can you imagine anyone covering Woman is the End of the World? So that's why I think it's a challenge for anyone to cover a Lennon song and to improve on it, and very few people do. But there's a few in my top 10 where people come close. Dylan, I think only once in his career, did a live version of Nowhere Man, which I was listening to on YouTube. Not very good quality. Interesting though. And then under Pointless, I've got a whole bunch of covers, like Red Hot Chili Peppers tried to cover I Found Out, didn't do anything for me. Candlebox tried to cover Steel and Glass, didn't do anything for me. Cheap Trick trying to cover Cold Turkey, and one thing one notices about that is immediately the lead guitar is missing, and it's such an essential element of the sound of the song. So Cheap Trick, although they did do a very good version of I'm Losing You with John Lennon, but they didn't come up trumps with Cold Turkey in my opinion. Magnificent Bastards did a version of How Do You Sleep. To me, no one could cover that song. No one should sing it other than John, and John probably chose not to sing it for the rest of his career because of the association it had with Paul McCartney, and he probably regretted writing it. Pearl Jam, Give Me Some Truth, did nothing for me, I'm afraid. Frank Zappa, I Am the Walrus, tried to watch this on YouTube and he's not even singing the lead vocal, so that was pretty pointless. Now Ozzy Osbourne does a terrible version of How, and there's even a video to go with it if you want to check it out. And talking of terrible, 1974, George Harrison, in his tour of the US, included the John Lennon Paul McCartney song In My Life in his set list, and completely ruined it. Not only is his voice shot, but he's singing it pretty badly, and there's a pretty sort of boring horn arrangement, and he changes the words to I Love God More. There's nothing wrong with that, but just all in all, not a great performance. So moving on to more positive things, and the 10 covers I really did enjoy, or do enjoy. Christina Aguilera, I was very impressed with her version of Mother. I didn't think anyone could do a version of that because it's so personal to Lennon, but she does a good version, sings it very well. Ringo, I thought the other year, did a very good version of John's song Grow Old With Me, which, as we know, was just a demo in his lifetime, but so he does a nice version with Paul McCartney supplying a nice bass line. Roxy Music, the year after John died, came out with a very tasteful and moving version of Jealous Guy. Nice video of that on YouTube to check out. Marianne Faithfull in 1980, I think it was her album Broken English, had a very interesting version of Working Class Hero, which I thoroughly enjoyed listening to the other day, and I remember it from back in the day. Richard Ashcroft, former singer of The Verve, and a lovely version of Free the People done a couple of years ago. Nice choice of cover. Not many people cover any songs from Mind Games, and that's quite an obscure track for non-Lennonologists, and very happy to see him do it, and very good version. R.E.M. didn't even know they did a version of Number 9 Dream. Delightful version, very well sung by Michael Stipe. Good instrumentation, just lovely version, brings out the melody. Michael Jackson's version of Come Together, originally featured in his Moonwalker video 1988, then came out on the History album. Superb version, superb bass. I wouldn't say it's better than the original because that's pretty tough, but it's a damn good, groovy, funky version. then we moved to Elton, and I do remember this from back in the day. His version of Lucy in the Sky got all the way to #1 in the charts. Certainly in the US it did, and it was included on his Greatest Hits Volume 2, and he's got his great band, Nigel Olsson, Dee Murray, David Johnson on this version, and very tastefully sung. John Lennon's contributing some kind of reggae guitar in the middle, and so all in all a very successful cover there. Neil Young does a very moving kind of semi-live version of Imagine, 2001. I think there was a virtual concert broadcast by 4 different TV stations where people were in various studios around the US recording stuff, and Neil Young sang Imagine with immense heartfelt passion, and this was just a few days after 9/11. And then at #1, and I didn't even know this song existed, and I have to say, until she passed away the other day, and this is Sinead O'Connor's version of Mind Games, and I was absolutely blown away by this when I listened to it. I love the way she changes the odd note to good effect, and you know that for sure. She goes down. I think it's beautifully sung, and the end, the Make Love Not War, she sings it and she's going up and up and up, and you think, is she going to reach the next note? She does. So it's a tour de force performance. She really has done a few damn good cover versions over the years. And this one is currently my favourite. So these are my top 10 favourite Lennon cover versions. And no doubt you have others. If you want to tell me about them in the comments, I'll check them out. But I find it a difficult artist to cover because his songs are so personal and his lyrics personal, so difficult to make an impact on a John Lennon song. But some worthy attempts, some less so. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.